Hello, my name is Annette DeLu, and you are listening to The Heart of You. Welcome back to The Heart of You. Today's topic is inner child work. Inner child work is super, super important. And I know a lot of people talk about it, and there are so many different ways to do it. And I am so excited to have Jana Wilson on the show today because she is an emotional healing educator, a meditation teacher, retreat leader, public speaker, hypnotherapist, and founder of the Emotional Healing System. She has helped thousands heal from the pain of their past. She has just released her memoir, Wise Little One: Learning to Love and Listen to My Inner Child. Jana, I want to welcome you to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Annette. It's a pleasure to be here.
Inner child work is so important, as I said. Like, it's been something that has been absolutely transformative for me and in my journey, in my spiritual awakening journey. How did you find inner child work through your spiritual awakening story?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was in my 20s. I'm 57 now. So in my 20s, there was a really big author and thought leader that was on PBS. You know how public broadcasting will have specials to, get people to donate money. And his name was John Bradshaw. He wrote Healing the Shame That Binds Us. And his work was really focused on the family of origin and addiction and codependency and inner child work. And so that was my first introduction in my
Mm.
20s. And I did a retreat with him, and he guided us back through a hypnotherapy session. And I had never done hypnotherapy up until that point. And, I discovered things in my childhood through working with him that he had us go back and rescue the child from a trauma. And it was very impactful. And it was the beginning of what led me, on this journey of awakening, really. I was about 28 years old when I attended his seminar.
Wow. So when you went back and rescued that child, what was the impact on your life in the immediate time after you did that?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. My ex-husband I was married to at the time, I asked him, a couple of years ago, like, do you remember much of when I came home from that event? Like, he said, you were really quiet for a while. There was a lot of deep processing. I had adverse childhood experiences, 10 out of 10. There's 10 questions clinicians ask. I experienced all of them.
Mm.
And so, my childhood was really turbulent. And in that experience with Bradshaw, I went back to a time which was surprising. It was a time I was living with my aunt, my mother. We'd been taken away from our parents, my brother and I was living with an aunt. And I went back and I stood in this room where I was lying, and began to wet the bed again, and I was like 9 years old from
Mm.
the acute trauma that I was going through in my home. What preceded that event was a gun incident where my mom, in a blackout state, had put a gun to my brother in my head and demanding information about my father. And of course, we were just children. We didn't really know what was going on. And then we were sent to live with, aunts and uncles.
Mm.
So coming out of that experience where I went back and rescued that little girl, I had this memory that I really thought it was a dream. And it was kind of fascinating. And it was when I was in that house with my aunt, they had put a contraption on the bed to set an alarm. So when I would urinate in the bed at night from the trauma, the alarm would go off, they would come and shame me. And so when I went back, that was the experience that out of all the traumatic experiences, I think that was like the icing on the cake, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I was standing in the doorway and he guided us to tell the child that we're here, we're your future self, and everything's going to be okay. You're going to make it through this. And if you want to come with me now, you can. Well, of course, my little girl wanted to come with me in this hypnotherapy session. And so I took her with me. And that was the beginning of me really, I had had experiences prior to that, but nothing so profound. And then I had this dream reoccurring where I would see an angel at the door of the room. And it was a reoccurring dream in my childhood. Now
Oh,
here I am
wow.
28 years old, yeah. So did I time travel? Did I like, how were those 2 events connected?
Yeah. I often think that that is the case. So, from the perspective of where we are now, we can certainly get guidance from our higher selves, from our souls, right?
Mhm.
That are maybe, a few years in the future or even decades into the future. And so sometimes I wonder if the guidance that I'm getting is from my future self or from another, higher source, whether it's from angels, spirit guides, whatever it is. So sometimes I really have to check in to see like where it is coming from because yeah, I do think that it is possible. You do time travel within your soul. So, yeah, that's incredible that you actually had that recurring dream because it's basically that confirmation.
Yeah, and so many people have asked me in interviewing, since the book has been released, is how did you overcome so much trauma to become, an emotional healing educator? And, really, you should have been a statistic. And I always say, it's my soul. I mean, I really believe my soul contracted with my parents for those experiences. I believe once I began to view my life from that perspective, that at a soul level, I chose, contracted with these parents for this experience, then what was the experience here to teach me? But I had awareness. Even as a young child, I would have mystical experiences where I would have a heightened state of consciousness where I would be aware. I'm the, at 12 years old, I was pulled out of my body. It was really a near death experience
Mm,
that happened through trauma. I start the book out in the prologue with this experience because it was so profound. It woke my soul up to knowing I was told by, I guess, many people would call it God. It was just infinite intelligence said, those are not your parents. That is not your life. This is. And what this was this expansive, like I was one with the cosmos. At 12 years old, I was fully immersed in this like star nebulas and I
wow.
just had such expansion, right? I was no longer in a physical body. I was just pure awareness. And I had that knowingness. And then soon as I got dropped back into my body, that feeling of knowingness never left me.
Yeah. How incredible. And what a beautiful gift that was for you at such a young age because going through what you were going through, I can imagine that having that sort of experience would give you that perspective to be able to push forward.
Yeah, I mean, it was the only thing as I was writing the book, Annette, I thought, I've been teaching 19 years. I've shared all these stories. I'm not going to have the editor I was working with. She was always encouraging me, to make sure that I take time after I write and send it to her and, our process. And I was like, oh, I'm fine. I have tools. I'm good. But it was, another layer of healing and it would bring up memory that I hadn't really explored in a while, right? And one
Mm-hmm.
of the memories was prior to that event of being pulled out of my body, I had an experience where I was very seriously considering committing suicide.
Mm.
And it was even more than suicide ideation. My mother had Valiums, I knew where they were, like I was really at that point. And then that memory came to me like, oh, no wonder, this this infinite intelligence said, "Oh no, you've got a mission here. You can't, it's not time."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's incredible when you're doing this kind of work because when you look at things from a different perspective, so when you're going through something like, let's say, 10 years ago, and you do this work and then you do it again, or we're revolving around the same subject, let's say 5 years from now, and then, let's say today, like you're going to have different takeaways from each moment in time. even if it's the same scenario you're working with.
Yeah, because our consciousness is always expanding and we're always
Mhm.
operating from a different level, right? So we see things differently.
Exactly, exactly. So, was this the type of inner child work that you were drawn to initially? So, the same kind that you were really introduced to, where you're almost sort of going into that parallel life, or that, that past life within this lifetime, if you will, that past moment, and working with it. Was that the initial inner child work that you decided to pursue?
Well, it's kind of like I shelved it in a way for quite a few years, probably about 8 years after that experience.
Mm,
I got really on a path of, a lot of metaphysical teachings and then moving in the direction of shadow work and psychosynthesis and integrative psychology. And then towards like my latter 30s, early 40s, I picked the shadow work the way I was taught shadow work by Debbie Ford. And I worked for her, I was on staff with her. She wrote the book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. And she was kind of this New York Times bestselling author that was known to really teach shadow work in a simpler way for people to understand. So I
mm,
got lit up with that, but there was a lot of integral psychology, which is kind of parts therapy and looking at subpersonalities, which didn't work for me. So my healing path, I brought back in the inner child work. And I literally, when I teach it, it's a 3-step process. So it's connection to spirit, which is foundational because that's what we are, or spiritual beings, right? So this is psycho spirituality. So connecting to spirit, I have, high emotionally intelligent people lean into discomfort. So when I connect to spirit, if I'm feeling discomfort, my inner child is my feeling self, right?
yeah.
Both positive and negative feelings. It's all related to as a child. So I, connect to spirit, say I need support, managing these emotions, regulating my emotions, processing what's going on. Then I treat the emotion like the child, I bring it up. And then usually shadow work introduces me into inner child work because usually it's the triggers, right? The people
Mhm.
pushing your buttons or something that you're getting the emotional charge. And step two, I've really created a relationship with myself as a third person. Like little Jana literally lives and moves with me, right? If I'm
Yeah.
seeing a sunset, she's watching the sunset. If you know, I'm very intimate with her and her feelings. And so I talk to her, I dialogue with her, tell me what am I saying and doing? What story am I repeating in my head that's causing you to feel anxious or disconnected or dismissed or unloved? Because, we can't get it from the outer world. We have to give it to ourselves. And she'll tell me, like, you promised you were going to do this and you haven't done it, or we say that we're going to do a lot of things and we don't do them, and it erodes the trust we have in ourselves. So I listen. Intimacy, that word, into me I see,
Yeah.
right? So it's that self-reflection, keep returning back to self and understanding and unpacking the stories that I've got going that keep me sabotaging myself or keep me I always tell clients that when you do this work and you have these tools, your refractory period gets really fast. It's not that people
Yeah.
don't trigger you, right?
Mhm.
It's just you can rebound. Your resiliency and your ability to adapt is
Mhm.
much quicker.
And not only that, but you can look at those triggers as a gift. So I think
Mhm.
that prior to doing this work myself, I, would move into a trigger and I would be totally bamboozled by it. And I would move into the wounding and all of that fun stuff. And then now when I see a trigger, I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this weird, icky way now. Okay, why am I feeling this? And then so instead of responding and reacting the way that I used to, I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool. So there's a trigger. I need to look at that later when I'm in meditation." You can kind of look at it from an objective point of view at that point.
Right. And in my training in shadow work, anytime our buttons are pushed, we're emotionally charged, positive or negative, because shadow can be light or dark.
Mhm.
The dark obviously gets our attention more. So say, someone pushes my buttons on being dismissive or disrespectful, then I know that they're just holding the mirror up, right? That I have to
Mhm.
look within. And so the steps of identifying, owning it, embracing it are very important, and it's not even done in meditation. It's done in a very clear, like sometimes on the fly, right? In the moment,
Mm. Okay.
like, okay, I'm affected right now. Ken Wilber said the distinction in shadow is you're either affected or informed.
Mm.
If I'm informed, it's just information. And it's fascinating because you and I could be having lunch at a beautiful little cafe there in Paris, and we're getting waited on, and I'm getting, activated and triggered by the waiter and the way I feel like they're treating me. And you're just like over there, very calm and patient. And you see that the behavior of the waiter isn't probably the best, but you're not affected by it, right? You're just
Mhm.
informed. So we're both experiencing the same thing, but our filter, right, based on our history, based on, what's happened to us, our false beliefs, our,
Mhm.
you're not affected, but I am. And so it's so clear that it's individual, right? It's not the other. We're helpless over other people anyway.
Yeah.
I think it just pisses us off that our greatest teachers are the ones that trigger us the most.
100%. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about, I know we still need to get to number 3, but can you tell us a little bit more about how you would do something like that on the fly? Because that's something I certainly don't know how to do yet. So like I said, like I usually have to take a break, go into a meditation and connect with my inner child, and then actually do the work there as opposed to doing it on the fly. So what are your suggestions for that?
Yeah, so let's say an arbitrary scale of like, 1 to 10, it's going to depend on the activation of the trigger, right?
Mm,
So
mhm.
if I'm not, really activated, like let's say, under 6 is kind of like, then I might be able to do it on the fly. Some are going to require time set aside to really, process. I'll give you an example. Like, so I was recently at a physician's office, and the physician assistant, there was something going on energetically with her and me. And I was very unaware of it until I got into her physical space. I kind of felt it on the phone. Anyway, long story short, she began to be extremely disrespectful to me, talking down to me. And I'm in this very tight quarter. So what happens? I go in stress response, heart starts beating, right?
Mhm.
So we all have our different adaptive, maladaptive behaviors. So
Mhm.
fight,
Yeah, yeah.
run, fawn,
Yep.
freeze. My tendency, and I share about in the book because I was around so much anger and violence, I had to fight a lot, is to go to fight.
Mm.
But of course, now, having so many tools and conscious awareness, I don't want to do that. It depletes my energy. It lowers my self esteem. It doesn't feel good. Yeah, I could break out a can of whoop ass on somebody, but that doesn't feel good, right?
Right.
Because I understand the other, her, is just a reflection of me.
Mm.
So if I go to war with her, who am I really warring with is myself.
Right.
So the breath is the first place. If the trigger is not too intense, as a heart math facilitator, we teach intelligent energy management techniques. So you start breathing, but let's use an example where you're not too triggered. Well, I was pretty triggered in this situation, but I breathed, I calibrated, I got really coherent, and then I was able to respond versus react.
Mm.
Now, on the fly, I would say, say we're at lunch, that scenario again, and, you and I are conscious. So you coach me, right? You
Mhm.
go, okay, I can tell you're activated. What kind of person is the first question would do that? Oh, he's unconscious. Okay. That's usually my go-to when people behave in certain ways. That's my first, I think, oh, they're unconscious. They don't know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so okay, they're unconscious. Okay. Then I asked the second step, own it. Have I ever been unconscious in the past? Well, of course. Am I unconscious somewhere in my life right now? If I'm being honest, probably. maybe am I that way to myself? So I turn it
Yeah.
on myself. Is there somewhere I'm, being unconscious with myself? Maybe there's behavior I'm doing or something and I'm not conscious of the price, the cost I'm paying, right? So I
Mhm.
own it. Then the third step is embracing it. So in that moment, I've already taken that maybe trigger that was at a 6 or 7 down to like a 3, because I immediately realize this person's reflecting me. I have that knowledge, right? I no longer am projecting on them. And so I'm able to accept, oh, they are me. I can be unconscious sometimes and have compassion for myself. So if I have compassion for myself when I'm unconscious, then I can extend it to the other,
Absolutely. Oh, I
right?
love that so much. Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
When it comes to having your inner child with you on that journey, how do you remind yourself to check in with her? Because that is something that I personally struggle with sometimes, where like I forget to check in with her. And you said that now you've gotten to a point where she's always with you. So how did you get to that point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing I tell clients to do, well, they have to bring a picture of themselves under the age of 7, usually around 5, to our events. And I say, take a picture of it and put it on your screensaver on your phone.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
every time you look at your phone, you're looking at a picture of you. I have one on my phone. Then I have pictures of myself around my house next to my bed in my bedroom. My husband has one of him as a little boy.
Mm,
And, so we really invite that essence of that pure, lovable, innocent child,
mm-hmm.
you know, so that we're aware of it because we're seeing images of ourselves everywhere on our phone, I've put it on my bathroom mirror before. I've taped one up there because when I
Mm,
brush my teeth, I look at her and I
mm-hmm.
tell her she's a good girl and I love her and she's doing a good job. And, my love language is words. So I
Mm-hmm.
really pour them on. Right.
Yeah.
So that's probably the best way. Also, having my phone, it goes off 3 times a day and it
Mm-hmm.
says, how's little Jana doing?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So it reminds me to go, oh, yeah, I haven't checked in a while. Like, how are you doing? How are you feeling?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that I'm holding before I go to bed? It goes off at 9 o'clock at night. Check in with little Jana, see if there's anything I'm holding from the day.
Mm-hmm. You know what? That's such a beautiful, beautiful suggestion and practice because it just came to me just now that it's just as important to check in with the little version of you as it is to check in with your higher self and your angels and guides and your guidance. Like, if you're in this spiritual realm, you're on a spiritual journey, you know how important it is to do your energy clearing, do your practice every day, whether it's connecting to your angels and guides or your higher self, whatever it is, to just add this to that practice is paramount.
Absolutely. I think when I teach reparenting, I say, okay, there's these two aspects of feelings. There's core feelings that are painful, like the Buddha said, suffering's optional, pain is
Mm,
inevitable.
mm,
Pain is a external, something's happening, right? So someone dies, we're going to grieve and have sorrow. If someone says or does something mean and hurtful, it's going to break our heart and we have heartbreak, heartache.
mhm,
If people behave in ways, we're helpless over others. If we don't think we are, we become very manipulative and controlling. So when people behave in certain ways, we have to remind ourselves one of the painful feelings that we have to hold as a human is helplessness over others. We're
mm,
completely irresponsible and
mhm,
helpless over others. And it's a painful feeling. Now, that when I go into being a healthy adult to little Jana, then I see myself as an ambassador or an emissary to the divine. So
mm,
I connect through my crown chakra, right? I bring in the source of my guides, love, infinite, energy into my heart. And then I hold that painful little girl. And there's nothing I can do, there's no process. If she's heartbroken, I just rock the baby, right? I place my hand on my heart and I tell her, I'm here. I know you're hurting. I love you. I manage my disappointments, right? I don't
Mm,
throw them on somebody else and say, you made me feel and you hurt me and you, right? I'm helpless over how they behave. I have to manage it.
right.
Then if it's a wounded feeling like shame, guilt, anxiety, anger, depression, all of those feelings, I realize, oh, that's my ego. That's my wounded child. That's the conditioned child that, is the most disruptive. And now that I can process. That's when I'm a healthy adult. I call in spirit. I say, listen, I need support with these emotions. And then I step into being a healthy adult and step out of being an adult child, 57 going on 7, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
And so it's like a trinity, this work of reparenting, because there's you, the healthy adult, leaning into the discomfort, saying, I've got this. I'm not alone. I'm a conduit for the divine. And then I have a core, precious little innocent child that just wants to give her gifts and her light to the world. And then I have one over here that was conditioned that sabotages and behaves, ridiculous sometimes. But I realize she has reasons to do that too.
sure.
So I love them
Absolutely.
both. It's like a healthy parent loves both, the child that acts out and the child that behaves.
And that's the unconditional love.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And then when you give it to yourself like that, Annette, I mean, as you know, it's like, you're effulgent. You're just spilling over with love for others. You don't take on the cares of others in a codependent, caretaking way, but you certainly have enough to give. Your cup is full.
Right. So then number 3 in your three-step process.
Yes. Oh, I keep forgetting that one, don't I? So first is, yeah, call in spirit, right? You lean
Mhm.
in, then call in the child, talk, dialogue with the child. Now we know we're operating from something. So I liken it to an operating system. So we read a book, we go to a retreat. It doesn't match our operating system, so it doesn't stick. So there's some deeper root cause to why we're creating suffering for ourselves, essentially, right?
Mm.
Anxiety, depression, whatever it is.
Mhm.
So I know there's some sort of false belief, a false narrative, some, limiting, disempowering belief that I picked up somewhere in my life. So I connect to spirit and I ask, what is it? And false beliefs are interesting. They're never ending. And one that I can share with you that I really, well, my first core one was I'm bad. I'm a bad
Mm.
girl.
Mhm.
And of course, I attracted situations and things to keep reaffirming. Yep. See, self fulfilling prophecy, you're bad. Not knowing, because no one teaches us this, oh, that's my operating system. It's just the software, which are the people, the relationships, the experiences, the circumstances that I kept drawing to me,
Mm.
was what was a reflection of what I felt about myself. I'm bad.
Mhm.
So, but one that I found in adulthood was, and it was just so pervasive, was I believe getting love from others feels better than giving it to myself.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness, Annette, when I uncovered that, it was a game changer because that's why I kept hooking in to girlfriends, to men, to something in the outer world, to work, to proving my, lovability, my competence, my
Mhm.
whatever,
Mhm.
right? And then when I unhooked from that and I shifted that belief to the truth, which spirit gave me,
Mhm.
is receiving love from me and giving it to yourself, right? Feels better than getting it from others.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I just started to say it every day. It became a mantra. Receiving love from spirit and giving it to myself feels better than getting it from others. And I would just say it, and my phone would go off. Like I did it like 12 times a day. I had it written on little post it notes everywhere. I mean, I made my environment a reflection. I even had like a sign made and hung it in my house because I knew this belief was at the root of all my suffering. And here I was, 49 years old, the middle of my life, alone, left a marriage. My daughter's grown, terrorizing the little girl, sometimes telling her we're going to be alone like my mother and nobody's going to want us and we're a has been and we're.
Mhm.
And once I kept saying that and I'd listen to little Jana every day, like, what do you want to do? What dress do you want to wear? Just loving her up, that one day I got up and it was the coolest experience. I sat down to meditate, and I just had this overwhelming vagus nerve firing, warm, fuzzy feeling when I went to say, giving love to myself feels better. Because, of course, when you meditate, you're spending quality time. So that's a love language. And as soon as I sat there, I thought, I don't have to repeat this anymore. I've proven it through my behavior.
Have you ever spent a whole day doing everything that your inner child tells you to do?
Absolutely. I mean, the day I start the book out with a story in 2015 where I'm in Esalen in Big Sur. Esalen, is a very famous human development retreat center, really the first of its kind. Had really just wanted to go to this retreat center so bad with this teacher that I adored, Sally Kempton. She's deceased about a month ago, but she was my teacher, meditation
Mm,
teacher.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, we don't die, right? She's just
Yeah.
moving on to her next great adventure.
Next plane. Yeah.
Exactly. And so
Mm.
being in her presence was actually enlightening. I would go out for about 6 hours.
Mm.
When I would come back from these meditation spells with the group, there was about 50, 60 of us, I would hear one word, leave. And so it was little Jana. There was nudity there, and I was molested as a child, and I've always had, discomfort with public nudity.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I think little Jana didn't feel comfortable, so she had my attention. I was in such a quiet place. She would be like, "Leave, leave." So I
Mm.
leave, and I say, "Okay, now what do you want to do?" So this is how a day, and I just did it a couple months ago. I take myself on a trip sometimes, just little Jana and I give her all the attention. I don't no husband, nobody. It's just all about little Jana. We eat where she wants to eat. I buy her clothes. I do everything, and the love, it's so palpable. It's the greatest love of all. I mean, Whitney Houston had
Mm.
it right with that song.
Yeah.
She's shown me, like, almost like a past, how when people have near death experiences, they'll say they saw like a flash of their whole life.
Yeah.
So the night I leave that retreat center, Annette, I'm in this restaurant and I start entertaining old narratives of, oh, look, everybody's with a partner and you're alone. And what do they have that you don't? And, yada, yada. And I'm sitting there and all of a sudden, like she appears. She's sitting across the table at this restaurant, my little 5-year-old self, cute as a button with her big brown eyes, because I was so aware, being in so much silence, of what I was thinking. I caught it really fast. And she, was there. And I went into her, it was like a mystical experience where I left my body, went into her body, and viewed myself from her eyes.
Oh, cool.
Oh my God. It was that, I think it Hafiz, the Persian poet, where he says, by God, when you see the beauty of yourself, you'll fall down in awe.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that just gave me such happiness.
Oh, it was like
Wow.
she said, "Look at this life that you came from and where you are today. You have arrived, like
Yeah.
you have given me everything." And it makes me emotional thinking about it, because
Of
that
course.
kind of love that comes from within, when you can really see yourself and meet yourself with all your darkness, with all your light, with all
Mm.
your wabi-sabi mistakes of your past, right?
Mhm.
And still say, I wouldn't want to be anybody but you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I just wanna sit with that for a moment.
Yeah, it just,
So, when you are doing this work and you are working with clients to get them to this place of this self love, to see themselves through these eyes of love, and you have clients who are saying, let's say, oh, I've already done inner child work, I've already done this before. What would you say to somebody who's sort of in that space of like, oh, I've been there, done that, I don't need to do it anymore?
well, when I'm working with someone privately, I do a very thorough interview.
Okay.
And during that interview process, if somebody said something like that, I would just reflect it back and say, would you really be calling me to do this work if you had done this in the past? It's pretty obvious they haven't. A lot of times I get that, Annette, with religion. So, I share in the book, I was born in the South, Bible Belt, had a lot of really cool mystical experiences as a child, deep relationship with Jesus, still love Jesus very, very much. relate with Gandhi. Like, I love your Jesus, it's your Christians I have a problem with often, right?
Mhm.
Because of the dogma and the doctrine and the legalism. And really it's just their state of consciousness too. It's
Sure.
like a it's like, soul ages. It's like a baby soul that needs to be told what to do. So at some point, I outgrew that very young. After that 12-year-old experience, I was like, I don't need that anymore, right? So when people call and say they're very attached to dogma and doctrine, I one of my questions is, are you open to reincarnation? We live in a very mysterious universe. I mean, they say even what we know is only 4%. And that's probably a lot of hubris, right? It's like an arrogance. Like we probably know a lot less. But even that number, then that means 96% is dark matter and dark energy. So we live in a mysterious universe. I can't work with somebody who can't live in the mystery.
Right.
Right? Because
100%.
yeah, because we don't know. And here's the thing I always say to clients, when I was very young, when I had my daughter at 22, and many lives, many masters came into my life, Dr. Brian
I
Weiss.
love that book. I actually did a seminar with him. That's actually one of the first seminars I did before I started reading the Akashic Records. Like, he's incredible. Highly
Oh,
recommended.
yes. And so this is like early 90s. I'm, like 90, 91. I'm living in Florida. He's in Miami. I ended up training with him in past life regression.
Oh my gosh.
I did so many regressions with him, and what I really got was from that book, just reading the book, saw it on
Mhm.
Oprah, went and bought it, The
Mhm.
Young Mother. It helped me because I'm trying to figure out, how am I gonna break the cycle? My mom had mental illness, she was really chaotic, my dad was an addict. Like, I was angry about my childhood, and here I am, I've got a child now, I'm alone, I'm a single mom. Like, how am I gonna break this? I need to get the lessons and not do what those parents did because I knew that they were effed up, right?
Mm,
Really
mhm.
bad.
Yeah.
And I knew there were some people out there that had the information, and his book changed my life and it helped me look. And I say this to clients, even if we don't know, if you adopt a belief, I believe the creator, if that belief is going to empower you and it gives you freedom and it's life giving, I believe whatever created us would want that.
Yeah.
So, do you really need to know? We don't know. Knowing is the
No.
booby prize, right?
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is that a lot of times in my sessions in the Akashic Records, the guides will tell me there is literally no reference for what you're asking in the human brain or in the human consciousness. So in other words, they try to give me a close approximation of what they're describing to me, but it's hard because there's so much, like you said, that is unknown, that we don't understand, that our brains can't even comprehend, that they try to dumb it down as much as possible so we actually can comprehend what they're saying, right? So it's one of those things where, if you can, like you said, if you can be open to the mysteries and let things unfold before you, and let your higher self, your inner child, your human body really walk together and guide you through this life, you're going to have a much better life than if you're going kicking and screaming.
Right, it's one of the kleshas in Vedanta, which goes back 6,000 years. It's, the clinging and the attachment that creates suffering.
Mhm.
And, the more attached we are, but let's face it, the biggest fear is the unknown.
Oh, 100%. Yes, yes, yes.
So that's
Absolutely.
why people are, there. I heard a story once. I love this. It was some personal development teacher. I think Les Brown was his name. And so this is way back in the 90s, but he said, I'll never forget it. He's on stage and he says, so there's a firing squad and this person's getting ready to be, executed.
Mm.
And the warden is standing there with his assistant, and the warden says to the prisoner, you know, you can take that door over there or the firing squad. Which do you choose? And so the prisoner says, what's behind the door? He said, it's the unknown. And he said, I'll take the firing squad. So he dies.
Wow.
The assistant says, what's behind the door? Freedom, but few choose it because it's unknown.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a pretty drastic story, but that I believe, that is our greatest fear. And so if we fear the unknown, we got to make love to the unknown. We got to woo it. We got to seduce it
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
that's the infinite possibilities, right?
Right. Well, and also, it's something that we can put into context of, let's say, our everyday lives. So maybe it's not a firing squad, maybe it's the significant other that is abusive. Well, you keep on going back because it's familiar versus going
Exactly.
into the unknown, which is something that you have no idea what's going to happen, right?
Right.
So there are so many times we get stuck in patterns in our lives because, well, I don't know what would happen if I did this, so I'm just going to stay with this thing that I know that is familiar to me versus saying, "You know what? No, I'm going to cut this off and I'm going to go towards what I know is going to be better for me regardless of whether I know what that is."
I agree. I mean, it's in Broken Open by Elizabeth Lesser. She's the co-founder of the Omega Institute in upstate New York. She wrote about William James, the philosopher. He talked about there's two types of people, once born and twice born. And once born people don't stray from the familiar. You know,
Mm,
when the soul pokes its head out of a half lived life, the once born person just doesn't attend to it because it scares them. So they
yeah.
do what society expects, they conform, right? They become an ordinary kind of mediocre life because they're afraid to take any risks, to really go out. And it's not a distinction of better than and less than, it's just the state of consciousness, right, of somebody who's more fearful. Then you
Yeah.
have a twice born who, will go to the woods and get lost and lose their way. And, they realize that there's this infinite, intelligent universe that's always guiding us, giving us signs. And, we have to be intentional. I always tell clients, your most valuable asset is your attention. Wherever you place it, of course, is fertilizing what you're placing it on. So you got to be
Mm,
really masterful at placing your attention on what you want versus what you don't, because that gets our attention more. We're afraid it's going to happen,
right.
right? And so you place your attention on what you want. We are the creator, right?
Yeah.
It's not outside of us. I mean,
Yep.
I like I said, I should be a statistic. I grew up on welfare, food stamps, labeled white trash. Parents, I mean, looked down upon in a small town, and
Wow.
all of that put on me that burden. But at my essence, I knew that's not who I am. I am a divine being. I deserve, a beautiful life. I just kept turning inside to that internal resource of remembering I'm a spirit, right? Having a human experience, not the other way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. And once you have that knowledge, as you said, the second reborn, it becomes infinitely harder to hold on to the fears. I find that when my old fears pop up again, which they do, and actually recently with this full moon, I had a couple of fears pop up that I'm like, "Oh wow, I haven't seen you in a while." And all of a sudden they're back, and it instantly felt uncomfortable. It wasn't like that familiar friend anymore. It was like that, "Oh god, ooh, I need to let you go because you're uncomfortable. I don't want you to be here," And so really having to go in and say, "Okay, well, why is this fear here and what am I why is this coming up at this exact time?" Right? And sort of exploring that and then being able to release the fear and let it go versus holding on to it for dear life, right? Which is what a lot of people do.
Right. And it's usually what the false evidence appearing real, right? It's not even real fear, because fear in clear and present danger is a painful emotion of being human. If
Mm,
we're, you and I are out hiking and we see a mountain lion, it is a natural response for us to, for it to elicit fear.
sure.
The challenge is we create stories. Thought alone creates stress response, creates a fearful scenario, because people aren't managing where their mind is. Where's my attention? And of
Yeah.
course, like all the great teachers, Eckhart Tolle, so many of them, it's in the present. We have
Yeah.
to keep coming back. People are like, I can't meditate. And I say, of course you can meditate. Why do you tell yourself you can't? Well, my mind's too busy. And I say, well, that's a myth. Like, the
Mm,
mind is a thought producing organ. You can't quiet the mind. You have to accept that it's going to be producing thoughts. As soon as you accept it, you transcend the thoughts. And that's when you have spaciousness and you're not thinking in your
right.
meditation practice. But really, the whole point of the practice is to be aware when you're lost in thought. So now I have a superpower. I go throughout my day in it, and I'm, catching myself stinking thinking about some worst case scenario in the future or something that happened, right,
Yep.
in the past. And it's a superpower because right in that moment, I have free will, I have choice, and I can look
Yeah.
up at the sky and I can go, thank you, Father, Mother, God. Thank you, guides. Thank you, universe, for this abundant place. And thank you for all the goodness. Money's coming to me from known and unknown sources. And I can just start to rampage of appreciation and gratitude. And of course, that's a very high frequency. And
Yeah.
then I go open my mailbox and there's a check, or I open my computer and there's a new client, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
It's magical. And we do live, it's like Einstein said, there's two ways to live life. One is though nothing's a miracle, and two is though everything is.
Absolutely. That I love that. That's a great quote. When you are in a state of fear, lower energy, like grief, sorrow, all of those things. And let's say you're not able to show up for your inner child, for your little version of you in a way that is comforting for her or that you can help her, where you literally feel like, you know what, I'm barely just hanging on. How would you address that with your inner child?
So if she's feeling like completely despondent, you mean, and shut down?
No, if you are like in that moment, if you're completely feeling despondent and you can't even console her, meaning if you're going to be including her in your everyday
Right.
routine and you're just having a really horrible day and something horrible happened or whatever it happens to be, and you're just, in sadness or grief or pain or anything like that, how do you address that with her?
Okay, so there's no separation. So all feeling is her. So if I am resisting some feeling, like not allowing her to feel that. So grief and sorrow are core painful emotions. That means a relationship's ended, somebody's died, something, I'm getting ready to put my dog down. There's nothing I can do over that, right? I just have to hold that. I have to learn how to breathe through emotion. That research shows it lasts 90 seconds. If you
Oh,
don't fight
wow.
it, yeah, if you don't resist it and you breathe through an emotion, an intense emotion, and you just keep letting it wash over, it's okay. I can handle this. I can be with my suffering. I can be with this feeling, and you can stay with it 90 seconds.
That's not very long.
No, it's as soon as you throw up your hand and say, this should not be happening. I don't want to be feeling this. Now I just stepped out of a conscious adult into an unconscious adult child.
Ah, okay.
So if I'm an unconscious adult child, and I am sometimes, we all
Mm,
are. So there's sometimes I'm aware, I'm so aware that I'm making a choice to suffer. And it is an addiction, I have complex post traumatic stress disorder. It's been a lifelong journey of meeting myself and being with myself, of loving myself and despising myself, it's this dance, right, between the dark
right.
and light. The problem is most people don't realize that's normal.
Ah, got it. Okay.
That's normal.
Yeah.
That's the human condition. It's
It
hard.
is.
But it's hard
Yeah.
being human. It's like, oh, last night my little girl woke me up around 12. And I thought, really, I've been to sleep 3 hours. There was heart palpitations. There was something going on in the ethers. As soon as you said it about this full moon, I believe it was the moon.
Yeah.
I'm
This was a
picking up
powerful one.
Oh, yeah, and I'm picking up collective stuff. It was not mine. I'm an empath. I'm feeling it. And so I just had to sit up and just say, I'm here. If there's anything going on, am I saying or doing anything that's making you anxious? It was dead silence. Nothing. It was like, okay, this is not mine.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way of actually identifying when things aren't yours, because sometimes it's hard to know if you're not tuning in regularly, that type of thing. And it's easier to know if you're checking in with other people who are spiritually aligned, and you can say, "Oh, I'm feeling this," and you can have a friend that says, "Oh yeah, I'm feeling the exact same thing," and then another friend, "Oh, I'm feeling the exact same thing." And then when you feel that, you're just like, "Ah, okay, so that's collective."
Yeah,
but
as
you
soon
don't
as
have
you
to.
said it, I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I got
Yeah.
validation," right? That
Mhm.
I knew it felt that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes we can't really know that unless, like you said, you're checking in with your little Jana, or you're checking in with other people to see, like, hey, okay, is this something that's going on for everybody?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, it's and when you're an empath, when you do this work, I have this deep desire to and have had since I was a child to make a difference in the world to I thought I was going to be a minister. I thought I was going to
Oh,
be like
wow.
yeah, a unity, which is, non-practical Christianity, very open and
Yeah.
expansive. And yeah, so I started heading down that path. But even as a child, I would preach to the neighborhood kids. I would go into ecstatic ecstasy. I would, dance around and get slain in the spirit, is what it's called. I
Mm.
fell in love with spirit. And so, being an empath, of course, I could feel all everybody's feelings around me.
Yeah.
And then, I was made to believe I'm crazy or something's wrong with me because I would talk about the elephant in the room.
Right, right.
And now as
Yeah.
an adult, I realize, it's really my superpower. My husband's, trained clinician, he's a physician. He, in his training, it's be compassionate, but don't put yourself in their shoes. Don't feel what they feel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's great advice.
Right, and I
Yeah.
believe sometimes I'm too attached to my client's inner child and
Mhm.
advocating for that inner child because it's so esoteric to the client. Like,
Mm.
"Well, what? Like, okay, I'm this inner child, and how do I make it real?" And, and then they start abandoning them, which is there's 4 ways we abandon the inner child. Can I share with you?
Please.
So one, and this is the biggest way most people do this, stay in your head.
Yeah.
Analyze, talk about it, like intellectualize it, whatever it is. Feelings are felt sense in the body, they're not in our head,
Yeah.
right? So that's the number one way we abandon the inner child is we try to think it out, talk it out, whatever. The second way is by pushing ourselves harshly. I
Mm.
really default to this one. I'm highly critical of myself. I can, really push, push, push to overachieve, to feel, worthy enough. It's one of my areas I have to be very, very mindful of.
Sure.
Judging myself, and just pushing harshly. Perfectionism. Third, addictions. And listen, addictions can be positive. Oh, I'm in a spiritual bypass and just meditate over this. Oh, I'm not going to set a boundary here. I'm just going to rise above. I'm bigger than that. Of course,
Mm.
spiritual bypassing can be a big addiction
Yeah,
for people on the spiritual path.
definitely.
Augustus Masters wrote a book called Spiritual Bypassing. I highly recommend it.
Mhm.
And then fourth is blaming others, being a victim.
Yeah.
Not taking responsibility. My feelings are mine. You can say and do whatever you do. I'm helpless over you. I have a choice whether I'm going to accept your gift.
Wow, yeah.
And that takes a high level of self awareness and self management and regulation to not take on other people's gifts of,
Yeah.
ugliness or whatever. Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned the spiritual bypassing and the, as you were saying, like, that it can be in the positive sense, because when you were mentioning earlier about the shadow work, about how it can be, light or dark, in the shadow, I don't think a lot of people address what that shadow and the light can look like. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's what that, what you would call, I guess, toxic positivity or whatever that happens to be. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
My work as a teacher and shadow work, and really it's my main training. And I do some pretty intense processes where, like, I'll give you an example. One is say I have a client who comes, most people are always coming. I wouldn't say most, I'd say I'd really overgeneralize here and just say everybody who comes is at war with themselves. At
Yeah.
some level, there's something they judge and hate about themselves and they don't want to be. And they've got this internal, the white wolf and the black wolf, they keep feeding the black wolf.
Yeah.
I have them sit down in front of me and do dyad processes. In group settings, we do this in like 3 people is in front of the person in the hot seat. And you identify these qualities and characteristics that you're most judging. So bitch was one. Obviously, women don't like to be called a bitch. But as soon
Mhm.
as we advocate for ourselves or stand up, that's what we get called.
Right.
Anything or any qualities that maybe like mother, my mother, people will say was a narcissist. She was selfish. She was self absorbed. So then I say, okay, get ready because you've got to embrace and own that you are your mother's daughter. There's a
Right.
part of you that's a narcissist and, selfish and whatever. And it might not be towards others and it might not come out the same way your mother's qualities came out, but they're
Mhm.
there and
Yep.
they're dormant and then you get triggered and you react a certain way. So we step into the fire with them. And sometimes it looks like, you hate yourself and they're sitting crying and snot's coming down and they're admitting for the first time out loud to another human, I hate myself.
Right.
And but it's emotional surgery.
Yeah.
It
And it
is.
takes precision. It takes direct targeting into what it is you're trying to work through. And the one thing that I know about the human brain and the ego is that it is super adept at dodging and avoiding and trying to not go to the direct place that you need to go within that inner child healing.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't. And I'm not the teacher for everyone because of my childhood and because I went through such extreme trauma, right? Imagine having a gun put to your head by your own mother and
Yeah,
being
I can't
told
even
she's going to,
imagine that.
yeah, kill you at 8 years old. And like,
Wow.
experiences seeing my dad try to suffocate my mom. I mean, my book is very inspiring, but it also can be triggering to someone too, who
Sure.
hasn't done the work. I don't apologize for that because I feel wholeheartedly what you can't feel, you can't heal.
Yeah.
So we got to go right into it, dive into it. And I can do that. So there's not really anyone that I can't meet and hold space for because I've met myself.
Right.
Right. So to the degree, healer, heal thyself. To
Yeah.
the degree the healer or whoever, I don't even give myself that kind of accolades. That's why I call myself a educator. I teach people how to heal themselves. I give them the
Mhm.
tools and then it's on them. Are they going to have the discipline to use them and to begin to behave in a different way?
Exactly. And that is a beautiful segue to the fact that you were speaking to me earlier about your book being a prescriptive memoir. So, how would you suggest people use this book to help themselves heal?
Well, I mean, definitely looking at the book here's the thing with trauma, right? I don't like this terminology of big T and little t.
Okay.
Big trauma, little trauma.
Yeah.
Trauma for a child is, my leg's broke, your finger's broke. Your finger is important to you. Yes, my leg might be, like we can't compare our traumas. And to a child, and I've worked with clients who said, my childhood was fine, my parents were fine, and I take them in hypnotherapy and they realize they weren't seen or heard. Or they
Mm.
realized there was a time where they got a message from their parents' behavior in their conditioning that the parents didn't model good boundaries, they talked about the other parent or they live vicariously through the child. All of these are archetypes of childhood trauma.
Yeah.
And you take my story with all these big, and we don't want to compare, right? It's
Yeah.
apples and oranges. It's different. Everybody's own story is different. But here's the thing, the book, for me, my whole intent was to share it all, to be transparent. And I left out traumas. I left out details of certain traumas because it would have been exploitive to
Oh,
little
okay.
Jana.
Yeah.
Was not necessary, because I know there's going to be people in my family who don't, align with me,
Mhm.
right? I had to divorce a lot of my family, especially when I walked away from their religion,
Yeah.
and they are going to read this and I've changed their names and they're not going to like it, right? And they're going to have,
Right.
there's haters, in other words, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, of
helpless.
course.
I'm helpless over that. But the
Yeah.
book for me is, it's to inspire to say, wow, if this woman could have went through these experiences and she kept finding some inner resource through this connection to spirit, because that's the book is really a spiritual book, right? Because it's
Mhm.
this theme throughout it, this overarching theme of little Jana when I believe when we come in, we're still very tethered, right, to the other
Yeah,
world, to the other dimensions,
absolutely.
right? And so
Yeah.
little Jana is wise. That's why that I didn't even know the name of the book in it, and I was getting a massage, and the book was already finished. It was like in January this year, and I'm laying there and I'm putting all this pressure on myself, and I go into that state of just bliss, when you start
Mhm.
falling asleep in a massage, and I come out of it and it drops, it downloads.
I love it.
Wise little one, learning to love and listen to my inner child. And I was like, bingo, the massage needs to be over now. I got to go. I'm excited.
I gotta go write this down.
Yeah. But
Oh, that's
I do
great.
share in 11 chapters of the book. I give these little boxes, that kind of extract some wisdom from the chapter, and then I summarize it.
Okay,
So here's one. I'll read real quick.
please.
They're very short, I just kind of succinct. So this was a chapter where I'm sharing with my mom and I'm confronting the past. I'm now a mother myself. My mom's behavior is I'm living with her. I've got a baby and I didn't wash the dishes and she's throwing dishes and breaking them. And I'm
Mhm.
23 years old.
Okay.
And I'm like, I've never spoke about the gun incident since it happened, since I was a child, to my brother, to anyone. And I realize I've got to confront my mother. I'm a mother myself now, and I'm scared of her, and I need to stand up to her and ask her, how could you have done what you did? So that's this chapter. And I even had to call my brother because she didn't believe me. She said she doesn't remember any of that. And he validated it. So at the end of this chapter, I say everyone is operating from their own level of consciousness. We all have a different reality based on how we perceive ourselves in the world. Forgiveness comes naturally when we can see another's perspective. Native Americans have a saying, walk a mile in his moccasins before you judge. When we are in inquiry versus accusation, we can open our heart and see the other's perspective. It doesn't mean we condone it. What it means is we accept that everyone is at their own level of consciousness and we don't personalize it. What are you taking personal that someone has done that is creating suffering?
I love that so much. It's so succinct and so beautiful, and you can take that and apply it to pretty much everything.
Yeah, and that's the prescriptive, right? So I gave them a little prescription and a question,
Yeah,
gave them the knowledge because you don't speak really to the reader that way in a memoir, So this is a
right.
very unique memoir.
I love it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are you still doing one-on-one client sessions? Are you doing group sessions? What are you doing currently?
Yes, and I'll fly to Paris and do one with you if you would like.
Beautiful. Yes. You're more than welcome. I would love to do that.
I'm just romanticizing where you are.
Absolutely.
Yes, I do. The privates book, I'm booked into spring of next year.
Okay.
At this stage of the game, I'm looking at bigger picture, right? The book, get the book out. My husband and I are co-authoring the emotional healing system right now. So
Beautiful.
private work is intense and I
Mhm.
really can get compassion fatigue and I can get depleted
Yeah.
because I'm such an empath. And my work is still in how can I hold space and not get too invested so that it depletes me,
Right.
right? So I'm still working on managing that. I love it though. I don't see myself ever retiring. I have a
Yeah.
2,600 square foot healing center with a yoga studio and nature. It's beautiful. So
Gorgeous.
people come here and they have big life change. Group retreats has been a focus that I really want to, continue. I've done them for 19 years and they're anywhere from I've had 20 people to 75.
Okay.
So, they average around 25, 30, 35 people at each retreat, group retreat. I have
Mhm.
one coming up next month in Florida. My husband co leads those retreats with me. He's a physician and he brings kind of all the geeky epigenetics and neuroplasticity and, kind of the validation of science with transformation.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
And what are the dates for that retreat?
September the 3rd through 8th. It's really like a 4.5 day, Monday through Friday. And we usually do the closing ceremony around 3.
Okay.
And those retreats are powerful. On my website, Emotional Healing Retreats, there's a video people can watch and kind of get a sense of what goes on at the retreat. Of course, we don't show everything because it might freak people out. They're like, oh
Sure,
my,
sure.
breath work or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And can you just give our listeners your website, your social media handles, and how they can get a hold of you?
Sure. It's Jana Wilson, Jana Wilson.com is the author website with the book. And then it has a link over to emotionalhealingretreats.com. So emotionalhealingretreats.com is the business that I launched in 2010 and had been doing retreats even prior to that, but really got the brand clear and cohesive with the emotional healing system. It was like,
Okay.
Annette, when I launched this business, retreats weren't really a thing
Sure.
in 2004. It was kind of just starting. And I wanted a retreat that was not just yoga and meditation. I wanted a deeper dive. And
Mm,
so, working at the Chopra Center with Deepak and with Debbie on staff, I really started to synchronize a lot of the processes I was learning that they did
mm,
and bringing all that in. So there's, it's spiritual, it's psychology, and then it's actual experiential. So it's
yeah.
not just teaching, it's like you're getting we do hypnotherapy in the group retreats, we do the mirror work, the breath work. We do a lot of different I teach people how to meditate using their primordial sound mantra.
Mm.
So it's a full, it was the retreat that I was looking for that I couldn't find.
Oh, well, and what's the best way to have that is to create it yourself. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that. Wonderful. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, Jana. Thank you so much for being here and thank you for the work
Oh,
that you're doing. It is so important. And yeah, I can't wait for everybody to read this book. It is called Wise Little One: Learning to Love and Listen to My Inner Child. So go and pick it up. I'm assuming people can pick it up anywhere they purchase their books.
yeah, Amazon. Yeah,
So
Barnes and
Amazon,
Noble. Yeah.
Barnes& and Noble. Okay, great. Obviously, for my Parisian audience, for my French audience, you can always go to the English speaking bookstores and order copies of whatever you would like. So have a wonderful, wonderful week, Jana. And thanks again.
Oh, thank you so much,
Have an
Annette. It was a
amazing
pleasure
day
speaking
and
with
never
you.
stop exploring your soul because it is the most important relationship you will ever have. If you are interested in learning more about me and the sessions that I do, feel free to go to my website at infinitesoullove.com. On all social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Infinite Soul Love 1111. Hey, and if you feel called, I would love it if you could rate The Heart of You on whatever streaming service you're using, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please take a moment, give it a review. It really does help the channel. Thanks so much.